We have a rotating roster of Dungeon Masters throughout the week. None of us discussed what we're going to do beforehand other than what was talked about during Session 0, but somehow this keeps happening. Two of our players are good friends, but man, one of them keeps rolling not once. I'm talking 9 times in one session in our attack rolls. So it's become policy to roll a percentile dice to see what happens because everyone agreed they wanted critical failures to have big consequences. The other guy, because of positioning, is often one of the potential targets. Somehow the dice keep rolling for him to get hit. Firebolt? Hits. Great Axe? Hits. You missed with the Great Axe?
Oh my god, I came as soon as I heard. What happened to Crispy number 4?
They were killed by me. It was an accident.
Oh! I'm so sorry. I know they must be eating at you.
I can barely talk about it.
Was it a weapon malfunction? I know sometimes our guns can kind of break and, arrows sometimes just go wherever they want and...
No, it's just...
Was it like a spell or... It was friendly fire with an axe? How did you even friendly fire with an axe? Why was he even in range of your axe? What happened?
Look, man, I don't know. I was just swinging and then all of a sudden his head flies off. It's not my fault.
It's been happening for months. The dice just hate that guy. It's becoming a running joke. Nobody's mad about it, but it's weird, just keeps on happening. Definitely not a horror story if you guys are all having fun, but I will say, when it comes to critical failure consequences, try to have them be on the person who actually crit failed. Having it be on someone else might not be the best play, but again, if you guys are having fun with it, I don't see the problem here. Most of the table was this group of friends I played with 13 years ago but fell out of touch with. When that point in the pandemic, everyone started reconnecting with old friends. Well, everyone in your life. Anyway, my old friend Cleric reached out to me. We became close and she invited me to a game her wife was about to start running. Warlock, Dungeon Master, and Sorcerer, who was Warlock's sister, were going to be there. While I cared about most of the people very much and missed them, the end of my friendship with Warlock happened in pretty bad terms. The Dungeon Master, I barely knew, but I had seen in a group chat with him all those years ago after he had just started dating Warlock. He wanted to meet his new boyfriend's friends, and with absolutely zero prompting, at some point, he sent the chat,
That's a peanut!
We didn't talk to him again until this table was formed, and when I heard Warlock had married him a few years later, I thought that was a weird choice, but not one I would lose any sleep over. When I heard the girls were scheduling a game, and he was going to be in it, I thought he had just married some guy with the same name, because I could not imagine any of those people being okay with that situation. After all the drama, my partner told me that nope, it was the same guy, the others just forgot it happened. After we'd been playing in Fighter, at the time DM's game a bit, our new Dungeon Master decided he wanted to start his own game. He wanted us to build backstories with his help so he could intertwine them with the world and the plot, and that honestly sounded like it would be pretty fun, if maybe a little bit overly ambitious for a brand new Dungeon Master, who only had a few sessions of experience as a player. We encouraged him to give it a shot anyway, and Fighter and I even offered to help him with anything he needed since we had the most Dungeon Master experience. His character creation process was already sus.
No, fuck off, stop that.
His husband was the first to send him a backstory, and he complained about every backstory he got after, saying they were not as cool as Warlock's. His main feedback was just to make it more like Warlock's backstory, but he wouldn't tell us what that backstory was, just that he wants it to be as cool as Warlock's. Sorcerer is getting pretty upset with that, and very apologetic about how she was just not as good at this as her brother Warlock. I was getting annoyed at how this was pointlessly hostile and unproductive. Fighter had a fantastic backstory that the Dungeon Master just did not care about, and I actually wrote a whole one-shot for things after all this horror story crap fell apart. Cleric eventually told us Dungeon Master had just written her backstory for her after she went to ask some questions. I went to Warlock and told him I wanted to see if maybe we could have something in common from our past as an underhanded way to figure out what exactly the DM was considering this pinnacle of good writing. Well, turns out it was a convoluted mess that read like a campaign from level 1 to 20. Had a very pointless start from Rags that eventually had him be a major player in every faction in the world, and some extra planar ones as well. For a level 1 character, I wasn't going to do that.
I have journeyed across this land and became a legendary hero. I am an unstoppable menace that has killed dragons and felled every enemy that stood in my way. And I
I'm actually at level 1. That's just I'm actually pretty confused on where to start. Oh. So, Monk and I got together instead and offered something else. Backstories with cool antagonists he could use against us. Anyway, the campaign was a mess from the start, but in the first session it was an entertaining mess. The group got together mostly by chance, but eventually it was pretty clear that the way the stories were connected was just so that he made the BBEG be several people in this group who were composed of whatever could be a villain from each of our backstories. Except warlocks. The problem with that was that most of our antagonists would have absolutely no reason to join each other in this world-ending plot, and they had no real connection to each other at all, other than our group. Most of them would actually make reasonable enemies for each other, other than us.
Hey, I just got to thinking, why are we friends again? What do you mean? I mean, I'm a schemer who wants to control society. You're a destructive maniac who wants to see society burn. We should really not like each other. So why are we allies? Okay, yeah, good point, but I mean, we're allies because our enemies are allies. Okay, but why are they allies? Well, they're allies because we're allies. That doesn't seem very reasonable to me. Want to just kill each other? Thought you'd never ask! Yeah!
We tried very hard to find a connection, and the best we came up with was, I guess they all hate us so much they teamed up to destroy the world just because we're in it. It was kind of silly, but it was fine. It would probably have been something that we'd easily ignored if this guy's voice acting was superior. As it happened, there was just a lot of bad faith from him being so judgmental of our backstories for not being at the level of his plot, only for the plot to be kinda dumb. Session 2 was kind of a blast for some of us, but really annoying for others. It started with a combat against several werewolves, when most of us had no way to harm werewolves. We ended up befriending the werewolves and their leader, but apparently thinking friends don't need consent, they snuck us a thing that would turn us into werewolves if we died. So he forced a TPK to make us all werewolves the next fight. It was kind of a mess, and he had clearly given zero thought as to what our stats would become at that point. Wait, so he thought of this whole convoluted plot to make you all werewolves, but didn't give an ounce of thought as to what would happen when you actually did? Peak DMing! It was Cleric and I that actually ended up figuring out an easy enough edit for the stat blocks for him to apply on the fly, and some of us at least had fun in the fight. Others, though, hated it. It was our second session as a group. The TPK had been forced, and now we're just playing as werewolves. He let everyone who didn't want to stay a werewolf get cured that same session, which actually pissed off the ones who hated it even more, since the gimmick didn't even have a point. On session 3, the plot randomly changes. We had specific quests we were going to, when all of a sudden, some girls teleported to where we were. We were being summoned to help the Dwarf King who had raised Warlock. That was how all the plot was thrown away in favor of the whims of this DMPC, but it also introduced another reoccurring problem. The Dungeon Master's voice for female NPCs. Look, I don't expect good voice acting. I don't even do voices myself. I don't expect amateur voice acting to be good. But I expect it not to be offensive. His voice for women was offensive. They were very annoying. Everything they said was pointless, as narration seemed to be mocking the way they acted the entire time. But the way they spoke was like a guy who had never paid attention to anything a woman ever said to him, making fun of the way he thinks women speak. It was very cringe, and he never stopped doing it, despite being told a few times he could just speak normally. The weirdest part was that he roleplayed as women a couple times before this session. They didn't sound like that, but from that point on, all of them sounded like he was making fun of women in a table with 4 women who were very visibly just cringing at all of it. So we got there, we mostly chilled in the back while this DMPC king and his army solved everything on their own, and at no point needed us. Next session started the most railroad thing I've ever played. Him and Warlock, his hubby, kept telling us he had this great idea prepared, and it started with some kind of murder mystery we had to investigate. We got connected by a guy who gave us the most vague instructions and just bailed. I told the Dungeon Master I wanted to follow. He seemed very confused by that because the guy left the tavern. I spent a surreal amount of time explaining I was gonna follow him outside, but the Dungeon Master was stuck in video game logic and seemed to think that since we were on the tavern map, the guy just despawned when he left. We eventually explained to him the action of leaving the tavern after the guy, and he made me roll a perception check to see if I could find him outside with a 21, and he told me that I failed.
Farewell, travelers. You will not see me again.
Dang, that guy was not kidding. Holy.
We tried to come up with more ideas on how to proceed. Warlock asked that we stop wasting time and broke into some NPC's house to investigate. Everyone noticed this was kind of a wild guess for him to be so certain about. We were starting to see those rails, but also that one of our party members might be the one driving the train. I agreed to break in as the changeling rogue, to which Dungeon Master was very confused because the Warlock has stealth too. I tried to explain that, like, sure, but this is my whole thing, and there's no reason why you'd leave the rogue out of breaking into somebody's house. He insisted he had a way out, and I didn't have to worry about it. The party agreed his way out was jumping out of the window. Every time I tried to do anything that I was built for, from then on, I was countered by Warlock also has stealth and has magic. I hated it, and I started to resent the rest of the party for going with it as well.
You just said each member of the team is chosen for their unique abilities. He does exactly what I do.
But like legitimately worse.
The entire session was just a lot of us finding out DMPC had some kind of scheme and finding no reason why we should trust him, and Warlock insisting we keep going and keep trusting him. At first, we were all trying to be involved in what was happening somehow, but after Cleric went to talk to people in her church and they were only willing to give information to Warlock for absolutely no reason, we stopped trying and just started to sometimes interact with the scenery by the train tracks. We spent the majority of this campaign following after Warlock, with Fighter throwing random things in the lava because it was funny, while the rest of us collected different things for her to just throw in the lava. Surprising absolutely nobody, DMPC had some kind of scheme that went directly against our overarching goals. When that nearly killed our sorcerer, I had my rogue pretend to side with him to where he was holding her and protect her. Sorcerer started PvP with me right after we escaped because I betrayed her, despite having literally seen every part of my plan to fake the betrayal and protect her. She saw it all play out. The entire time, Warlock, who was actually collaborating with the evil DMPC the entire time and was still defending him, was also standing right there. She was furious with me out of character as well. This just became... It was a very strange argument. This was when we first noticed the most unhinged habit our sorcerer had. When Dungeon Master or Warlock upset her, she'd just take it out on me. She even explained at some point she did that because she felt safer being angry towards me than towards them. I didn't even know what to say to that. I ended up forgiving her when she promised she'd not take me being safer for her for granted again. That is what we call an
Awful apology!
Seriously, my god. We had a few problems in-game as well. Our characters had no reason to be doing anything anymore because the Dungeon Master player character had killed the plot. We tried making the new goal to be getting revenge against the DMPC, but Warlock and Dungeon Master got loudly angry at that because he isn't a bad guy, he just has complex motivations. Neither could understand us explaining that A, they weren't that complex, B, he was just a dick and nobody but them liked him, in or out of character, and his actions still made him the most active opposition for our original goals, even if he wasn't the big bad evil guy.
My family! Whoever did this, they will pay. But no! You can't kill them! They killed my whole family and murdered my entire village. I'm pretty pissed about it. I think I'm justified in that. You don't understand. The prince that killed your family had a difficult childhood. Their father ignored them all their life. Dude, what? In addition, their sister is pretty sick, and recently they've been making slightly less money. I don't think that really checks out. There are reasons why they have killed your entire family and murdered your village. Please, find mercy in your heart. It's better for everyone.
You're not finding a lot of mercy in your heart, are you? Yeah. Well, I tried my best. He's over there. Come here.
Other problem was that Sorcerer had just tried to kill my character, and Dungeon Master wasn't letting her retcon that. So now, not only did the party have no goal, my rogue had no reason to work with her anymore. I had an idea I wish I saved for a better game though. I told Dungeon Master the only thing in character for my character was to leave. But that didn't mean the party had to know she left, because a large portion of our enemies were changelings, and now they knew where we were. We could get infiltrated by a changeling, played by me, and use that to make the plot twist work, since having the player play the shapeshifter pretending to be their character kills any meta-knowledge of the infiltration. He could use that NPC to plant the new goals for the party until my actual character returned. He randomly pulled Monk into this as well, which I alerted him was increasing the risk of making all this too antagonistic, and we took to preparing this plot together. Dungeon Master determined very quickly I was to figure out how to balance the changelings. I thought he meant he wanted me to help him, but he clarified he meant I would prepare the fight against them completely. Oh yeah, who doesn't love that guy at work who's like, hey, I need you to help you with this task, and then he just drops the entire task in your lap and gives you a vague threat if you don't do it.
We love that guy, right? It's awesome.
Anyway, I came up with adventure sheets and enemy stats for them. He had a hard time understanding why the sheets were separate, and I explained to him a few times that the design goals for a player character are different from an enemy's.
Oh my god, thank you.
I got so many dumb comments after I made a whole video on that exact freaking topic. Validation aside, I even showed him some resource on how to create entire NPC stats after finding out all his NPCs just had player character sheets comments withheld. The adventurer sheets and notes I attached to them were focused on how new rogue and new monk of different subclasses could pretend to be our characters and collaborate with the group, and the enemy stats I gave to him were some of the most complete written encounters I ever prepared. I started off by making these two creatures have abilities that were coherent for their adventuring classes, and knowing I was not going to be playing them in a fight, wrote down a small but complete document about their tactics, depending on how much information they would get from the party before it was a fight, and how to adjust them to make them more threatening the more they learned. They even had a small checklist of tactical adaptation he could fill out as the game progressed to only have available on the combat sheet the things that would make sense. I detailed what to do if he wanted to scare us a little bit, how they could maneuver if he wanted to lower the pressure or heighten it. So I was confused when minutes before the game started he asked me to make up a stat for a friendly NPC as well, but I sent one to him anyway. That was the only session in the game where Monk and I actually got to play. The moment we were secretly playing NPCs and conspiring with him, he wanted us to engage with the world, to be part of things. It was fun at times, but then we noticed it was kind of toxic. It was like he saw us as part of his team now, so he wanted us to be able to enjoy his world. The party didn't actually get to do much, and never got much of a chance to be involved in anything. Even if we tried to engage with them, they never actually got a chance to suss us out. Eventually, he tried to force the party into some bandit hideout where we were going to ambush them. I offered to disguise myself as one of the bandits, to scout and sabotage what I could do before I engage. And there right there was another situation where my rogue was told it made no sense for her because Warlock has stealth too. I chose the worst time to make a stand on the fact it was really annoying that the things I designed my character to be good at were constantly taken away from me because Warlock put 1 proficiency in stealth, and that was somehow being treated as equivalent to a changeling assassin with expertise in deception and stealth wearing a cloak of elven kind.
All my life, I have been training as an assassin, preparing for any sort of infiltration, a master of deception with gear perfectly tailored for every kind of stealth situation.
Yeah, well, I watched American Ninja Warrior this one time, so I'm pretty sure I'm on your level.
So you are amazing, singular, spectacular. You are perfect as a specialist.
I feel kind of undervalued.
Excuse me, what did you say?
What?
Is that main character syndrome I sense? Are you trying to steal the spotlight from me? Absolutely disgusting. Can't you let me have this one moment among all the moments that I have? You just...
Also, I kind of hated how stupid this entire game was because nobody would say no to the guy. Why was this the worst time to pick the fight though? Because they were about to find out it was actually objectively better for them if Warlock went this time because I was playing the bad guy. And that took away a lot from my complaint, despite it being a reoccurring problem. They overruled me anyway, though. I sent DM a note, and he asked for a check. I rolled with advantage. He nodded. They all immediately guessed it was a stealth check to get away from the party and go into the place on my own. So, at some point, the Warlock found my character captured, and Fighter got angry at me out of character for ignoring what the party said. They should send Warlock. I asked Dungeon Master if that was my character. He said yes. He then asked me to repeat the roll I had rolled before, and when I succeeded the stealth roll again, he told me I had a surprise round on Warlock. I wasn't an assassin with this changeling other rogue, which he got disappointed about, and I was randomly thrown into a situation of actually playing both my character and the enemy version of my character in the same fight. The party had been balanced specifically for the two changelings to be pretty difficult for the entire party to beat, so I was already worried because Warlock and my actual rogue had just been ambushed by one of them. We BS'd a reason for the rest of the party to join fast, which included the changeling monk. It was honestly a pretty scary start, and there was some hype when monk attacked us as well, and we really understood that we were playing D&D Among Us now. Fine, you can do it again. But no more! Every turn that started had some tension on which side that character was on. But for some reason, the Dungeon Master admitted out loud it was just Monk and myself that were the bad guys, and also added several bandits to the fight as well. Monk was very new to D&D, so I texted him telling him how he has to nerf his changeling on the spot. Every one of the bandits starts blasting us with 4th level spells, so I texted Monk again, further nerfing the changelings and asking him to basically just do whatever BS that didn't impact the fight very much without the DM noticing. It became the worst fight I ever played. To make it worse, it ended up with the friendly NPC the DM randomly asked to make. Remember him? He just showed up, fully healed everyone with some AoE lay on hands, which by the way I never gave her, and destroyed a bunch of enemies with some kind of spell he just invented. Cleric and Fighter are incredibly angry at me. They could immediately tell the changelings were my doing because they noticed the bandits joined in, had several ways of shutting down our party that DM wouldn't know about. I had also told them that I was late earlier because DM had asked for stats for an ally. So they also thought I came up with that BS at the end too. All the players were upset at me for arguing with them in defense of the enemy. The Dungeon Master fully embraced letting them think I did all of this. I was fighting on two fronts as I tried to explain I did not come up with whatever that combat ended up being, and I still stood by my point of letting my rogue do rogue stuff.
Man, you got thrown under the bus so hard you got yeeted into an isekai anime.
Isekai? I don't care. At some point, Cleric and Fighter finally believed I didn't balance that fight, because I sent them the document that had the fight I actually came up with detailed, but at no point did they understand my problem with never getting to roll anything that I specialized in. Fighter at some point said I sound like a bard who's mad the paladin sometimes also rolls persuasion. As I tried to explain, I'm more like a bard the paladin tells to shut up every time she speaks because he also has persuasion. The party pointed out that was a weird complaint to make right after I played an infiltrator for an entire session, and I pointlessly tried to explain that playing an infiltrator for an entire session was honestly a lot of fun, and it only served to highlight how I never got to play my actual character in favor of the party. They never really agreed my point was valid, but Warlock ended up dramatically declaring he would never roll stealth again after I sighed and said if we could just declare that my rogue died in that mess, I'd re-roll something I was going to build to basically only attack. But DM declared that him never rolling stealth again should mean my problem was solved and we should just move on. I cannot exaggerate enough how much I hate when people do that. Like, there's a reasonable solution to this problem. You don't need to throw yourself on your sword for a more dramatic solution just to get attention and make me feel bad. It's so manipulative, I despise that. I honestly should have left at that point. I was angry at all of them, and Cleric and Fighter were angry at me for things I kind of feel like asking if I'm the a-hole for. Instead, I agreed, but warned I was gonna leave if this became a thing again. The worst and final stretch of the game started at this point. In the new wild turn the story took, the Dungeon Master decided we were now going to get some land and a title, and we were going to build a keep there. I think it was in some way originally an idea for the DMPC King to be liked by the party again, since other than Warlock, we all hated him for, you know, backstabbing us, but the place was cursed. Turns out there was a basement with a devil and some kind of stasis inside of it, and the only way to clear the curse was to break the stasis and kill it. The Dungeon Master kept talking about how this thing was way too powerful, and we would die for sure. I checked our supplies, asked if we had a few minutes before we fought, and clarified there was no rust, but the curse wasn't going anywhere. So I opened the Magic Circle page and handed it over to Cleric with a note that said, "Sorry for the changelings." She cast Magic Circle around the thing, set it to reverse, set it for devils, and we shot fish in a barrel for a little bit as DM raged about that being unfair. Basic freaking encounter design, dude, not the party's fault. It's like when I saw the final boss of Cyberpunk in the anime, and he's this unstoppable beast that no one can beat, and in the game, I killed him in 3 minutes with one try. At least there was a fun power fantasy. Here, it's just embarrassing, especially if you hype it up first, man, come on. Cleric and I were cool after that, and we quickly decided we didn't care enough for our Dungeon Master to give him any tips on how encounters could be more fun if players do stuff like that, and he didn't need to take wins from us. After that, the DM started to be more open in running the game exclusively for Warlock. NPCs ignored everyone who was not Warlock, and in combat, all of our enemies immediately went after me, and they suddenly had action surges, as many action surges as they needed to down me in the first round, which was funny because as an assassin battlemaster, that was basically the spot where I'm most useful anyway. Enemies started to ignore Warlock completely. Everything I tried to do failed because I wasn't doing it with magic. With the 24 and Cleric's assistance, I couldn't identify a glowing rune. Might be a magic trap because I wasn't a spellcaster. Enemies were immune to all my trip attacks regardless of size. The same targets would then fall prone to Eldritch Smite, and the explanation given was that magic would always be able to do things that mundane means can't. The first time an enemy walked into my range and I used the brace to have an off-turn sneak attack, he retconned the movement right after because he didn't want to be hit. And he was angry the rest of the session when told we, the players, did not agree with him being able to retcon movement to deny us our abilities. Sorcerer couldn't do anything she asked anymore because he did not see the point, and Cleric was always overruled by him. We went on a mission that had the in-game justification of DMPC King wants us to solve a thing, but we're too low level to do it, so he wants us to go on this battle royale to level up. We expressed confusion at levels being treated as a universe metric, but he was dead serious. We started to be mostly on our phones, unless he called for a roll. Nobody engaged anymore, not even Warlock, because the only one who could accomplish anything was Warlock. But DM just gave him everything on a silver platter, so Warlock had nothing to do. The world just bent to his will, and even Warlock was obviously bored. We had long, awkward silences as the Dungeon Master expected us to do anything, and I was the only one to break them if they lasted too long, because somehow I still felt bad for the guy when that happened. Seriously? Nothing worse for a DM.
So what do you guys want to do? Guys, what do you want to... Gerald? Do you have anything you want to do?
Gerald's dead, dude.
Oh. What about you?
Oh, I just don't care.
At some point, we had this dungeon where the party split up, and we would later fight a boss together. For the split up part, Warlock killed 2 normal wolves he didn't have to roll for. DM narrated him killing them before the monk and sorcerer even had to get involved. Cleric, Fighter, and I had to fight a Hydra. This other adventuring party had been fighting wrong for a while, so it had 10 heads and full health. Plus, the other adventuring party were 8 NPCs, all higher level adventurers than we were, which he proudly declared. We tried to have Fighter be a fallback for me if I got caught, so I would attack people and break contact. Even with all that, the other adventuring party just chased us away from the Hydra. People I dropped kept being described as backup when we saw them again, so we thought we were draining resources at least to heal them. He later admitted he was just giving their full health again because it was more fun if they were at full health. Eventually, we just engaged for real, and I used a surprise round to nuke their cleric, and he decided he wasn't actually dead because he liked that NPC. I looked him dead in the eye and said, look, he's dead because I killed him several times over. Random cleric number 32 is dead because you put him in combat against us, and I killed him according to every rule in this game, and I'm not negotiating with you on that. He backed down and agreed the cleric would be dead, but he was making another one later on. After then, every enemy attacked me with their multiple action surges and dropped me. He was sure we were going to die, but I think he wasn't aware that enemies could finish me off, so he kept downing me, and Cleric kept picking me back up as Fighter just killed all of them. I had my character make fun of one of the NPCs because they couldn't keep her down, and this guy started to scream in character at my character to shut up, despite the fact he would never speak as enemies in battle before this point, and that he was turning red and actually shouting in real life. But if asked by the others, he kept saying, "Oh, it's the NPC!" When Fighter killed them all, we took a break, and then he declared that all 6 of us had just survived the fight he was planning as the ending, and it was going way too easy. Fighter, Cleric, and I were supposed to die. He'd only balanced the very final fight for Warlock and the others, so he wasn't going to bother running it. He was just declaring we won, and we went back to the DMPC King, who was back in our lands for some reason. We had a party meeting with the DMPC King where he gave us this task to investigate some nobles. I asked DM if I could use some of my underground contacts start taking a look at some things for us, since my entire backstory involved a network of changeling spies and criminals that he had established before, and he said some were still loyal to me, not to my big bad evil guy. He said that made no sense because why would I know any spies or criminals? Warlock asked if he could use some of his underground contacts to start taking a look for us. DM asked what he wanted to do. He repeated what I literally had just said, and the Dungeon Master said, "Sure." I turned to both of them and asked if they were serious. Warlock took a deep breath and explained he was asking his contacts because it's how he can help, considering he's the guy who knows shady people, etc., who could help us out. And I just didn't say another word. I talked to Fighter after we left to make sure I could stay in her game if I quit this BS, and then I texted DM saying I was out. He asked me why, and I said I wanted to. I think he wanted an argument, but I just didn't really engage at that time. He opted to just never mention the game again or try to schedule another session instead of ever admitting to the rest of the party someone wanted to leave. It amused me that I was able to point out I literally warned them I was leaving if that happened again, but honestly it wasn't even that. It was then I noticed the only time I had fun in this game in a long time was when we ruined it for him, and that wasn't something I wanted to be a part of. Frankly, good. That is a really mature point of view to have. I've seen those stories where the heroic writer of the story gets nuclear revenge on their Dungeon Master's game, but normally, number one, those stories are very unbelievable and strain credulity, but number two, I just don't think that's a really healthy mentality to have. Look, those stories are fun, but in terms of actual solutions, they're not practical, and this is something many more people should learn from. If the only fun you get out of a game is ruining the game for the Dungeon Master, it's time to leave. The DM sucks, and they're making you worse too. It's never worth it to stay in an experience like that. This DM sucks. The favoritism towards his husband is so plain and obvious it becomes unbelievable. And on top of that, the rest of the party clearly not caring about the rogue being disregarded sucks. I can totally see how this can happen. The party's line of reasoning that they use with the Paladin and Bard comparison isn't completely off, but it clearly doesn't match at least what I'm seeing here. Combine that with the DM's other quirks of having god-awful encounter design, using character creators to make monsters, which I hate, and the sexist NPC voices, yeah, remember those, and making your players do all the work for you? Oh god, just an awful experience that I'm glad you ended up leaving. So many personal pet peeves crammed into one terrible DM. Whew. Oh boy, it's been a really long time since we've done a true long one, so hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips series. You guys are really enjoying our latest Critical Role episode. It's linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. This ain't Skyrim, dude, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, if you have your own horror stories, you can send them directly to us. There's an email down in the description down below. Send your stories our way for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, in essence, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.
Oh, I forgot to change the lights. Oh my god, it broke the bed frame.